speaking of clown shows in the NFL.
Okay. Dang.
Step right up.
Didn't we just spend the first part of the hour doing it?
Yeah, listen, there's some
We're just
teams.
going to continue on?
Listen, there's some teams getting ready for a playoff game. There's other teams getting ready for the circus. And the latest team is the Tennessee Titans.
Dang. Dang, get your cotton candy. Get your popcorn.
It's weird.
Get your Slurpee.
All right, so here's the nuts and bolts of what's happening with the Titans. They fired their GM, Rand Carthon. 4 other executives were shown the door on Tuesday. Albert Breer put together a nice timeline of just, basically what's gone on there and how the Tennessee Titans have operated, and the Tennessee Titans have decided to do things there over the past couple of years. The breakdown goes like this. December of 22, John Robinson, the GM, was fired. January of 23, Rand Carthon was hired as GM. January of 24, Mike Vrabel was fired as head coach. January of 24, Brian Callahan hired as head coach. January of 25, Rand Carthon fired as GM. And apparently there is somebody who is pulling the strings by the name of Chad Brinker. He was hired as an assistant GM 2 years ago to Rand Carthon. He's now the president of football ops.
Interesting. Which, by the way, you didn't mention within that time frame that you let go of Derrick Henry.
No, you don't need him.
As well as A.J. Brown.
Yeah, you don't need
Okay,
that.
all right.
Fine.
I will say this about Chad Brinker, though. He's really good for that position. Now, the general manager position's something completely different. But, again, this all comes down to me to ownership. Like, you look at the teams that continually keep going through head coaching, general manager searches, hiring and firings, have a hard time having any sort of sustainability. That all is directly tied to their ownership. And that's a group that is probably focused right now on a new stadium, trying to get this thing right moving forward. But is Will Levis the quarterback? Probably not after this year. And, with the way the season went for Brian Callahan, people questioning whether or not this team was physical, their toughness, which we heard the clip, which sounds great, but
he was butthurt over it.
If you replicate another season of this year, next year, he's probably going to be gone too.
Yeah,
that's the reality of where this team's at.
It'll be interesting to see how it all plays out because Will Levis could have been the answer at quarterback. It doesn't seem like that's what it's going to be. It doesn't seem like they have the answer to that position on their roster, and it doesn't seem like they have too many answers to anything that they need in terms of somebody who's going to be a playmaker, change the way this team is kind of looked at. So, and that's a sad commentary because you do have some really nice pieces in place with that team personnel wise. It's just that the main positions you're lacking. So it'll be interesting to see what their move is. When you question a team's physicality and nature at the pro level, that's really, really a bad sign. Whether you subscribe to it or not, whether you in your heart of hearts believe that your team isn't a soft team, it's just bad if that's the perception that is getting out there. So they have some work to do, and it's not going to be an easy fix. Now, I will say this. I think it's a much more feasible proposition for this organization to take their team and their franchise in the right direction quicker than the conversation again prior to if Vrabel takes that job in Las Vegas. It's going to be a different scenario. Whoever takes that job with New England, it's just going to be a different scenario. You're going to have an easier time of adjusting and adapting and being able to kind of catch up and get up to speed to the other teams in that division. Whereas you go into that West, You just don't get that. You don't get that luxury, and if you're going to be judged and measured the way that they're judging and measuring AP right now and letting him go, that's just going to be an interesting way to watch it all play out.
Now, you were mentioning the timeline of, normally the successful organizations, the coach and the GM are on a similar timeline. When one's getting fired, the other one's getting it. Like, this feels like that's what's happening here. Like, it feels like Brian Callahan, like, who the hell knows how much longer he's going to get. And if they draft Shedeur Sanders and say they go through their struggles because he's a rookie quarterback, which is totally understandable based on what we've seen from rookie quarterbacks before, he's going to be out. And then what do? Go to Dion? Like, it just feels like they're in this perpetual state of, well, no, this year it didn't work, that guy's out. And then it's like the teeter-totter effect every year with this team. And this has been like past 2-3 years.
And I think the Titans spent the third most money this offseason, which I guess was maybe justification for why they're moving on from Rand Carthon, because it was spent, but it didn't work out. Although, again, Brian Callahan's culpable. I'm not sure this roster was where it needed to be either to allow them to have success. I mean, you were still in that kind of figuring out mode whether or not Will Levis is the guy. I think after the season, based on them inserting Mason Rudolph back in, the staff kind of gave you that answer. They don't believe Will Levis is the guy. So if that's the case, and you look at this next year as it's a make or break year, well, what are you going to do? And if you go hire a new general manager, is he going to spend? I mean, you just fired the last general manager because he spent a bunch and it didn't work out. So what are you not going to spend? Are you going to hamstring Brian Callahan with a roster that needs improvement, but you're not willing to do it through the means of free agency to have at least some sort of a quick fix or improve it? I feel like they're in a really tough spot if they're not willing to be patient. It's almost as if, and not that the NFL would ever do this, but if we ran an organization, I'd be like, man, you need to give that head coach, general manager at least 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think at least 3 years. 4 is probably too much. I think with the pressure that we've seen,
you'll know exactly where you are by year 4.
Yeah,
you'll know exactly. You might not be exactly where you want to be, but by year 3, giving a team, a GM, even a coach, if they're on the same page, if you're giving them up to 3 years, do we want to keep going beyond that 3 years, right, or do we move on after that 3? But one or two,
no,
it's not enough.
It's not enough. It's not enough to change over the roster, to do the things you need to do. I think with the salary cap too, but more so than that too, like to implement a foundation of what you want that culture to be. So it doesn't matter what organization we're talking about between the Raiders and the Patriots and the Titans, because I kind of look at all 3 of those and go, yeah, if you want to be the Patriots and act like this is still Bill Belichick and Tom Brady and this whole like the Patriot way, that's gone.
Gone.
Like you can't sell that as a head coach. Robert Kraft can't sell that as an owner. And a lot of these organizations that are in this state of disarray and where they're looking at trying to figure out who their head coach, general manager are, it's like watching someone start to build a home. And they kind of start to build that foundation, right? They pour the cement, and as they start building up and framing out the house, they just have someone come in and knock it over again every year. And you're like, wait, what happened there? Like, oh yeah, the code inspector came by. That wasn't built to code. Okay, build it up again. I knock it down again. All right, storm came by. Yeah, knocked it down. They're gonna have to rebuild it again. It wasn't built strong enough. Like every single time you get an example of that, every single offseason, it's usually with organizations who have zero patience. And they don't trust the hiring process of when they go and hire a head coach and general manager in the first place.
Then you got to ask the question, do you have to redo the whole foundation of that property? Instead of just putting something up that has to get knocked down again, you got to have enough time to put those foundational pieces in place.